In this video, I'll talk about advanced one-point grids with some examples, and it's in my book, Ellen's Guide to Drawing Shapes on Amazon. Let's use this image to review some of what I said in the last lecture. So let's figure out how to place these columns and how to draw this tile floor. Let's say we know the position of this first column and the third column. Draw the trapezoid, find its center, and draw the diagonal. And where the diagonal hits the center line is the position of the second column. Now, to finish the tile floor, have the measuring line nearby and far away with the same number of units and connect like units together. Then, where these converging lines hit the diagonal, like this spot right here, would be a position of a horizontal line. Once you have 2D grid like this, you can make it 3D by continuing these horizontal lines vertically up and setting up a vertical measuring line. It's useful to have the same units as you have on the horizontal line so that these are true squares, and these lines converge toward the vanishing point. But once they reach the back of the room, they go horizontally. So you end up with this grid over here where this is eye level because lines above it go down and lines below it go up. I set up some figures here in a bureau, and since these are squares with equal sides, we can use this grid to scale things, to measure things. So this figure is 1 foot wide and 7 feet long. This too is 1 foot wide and 7 feet long. I made the bureau 4 feet tall and 1 foot wide and 3.5 feet deep. So everything's in scale. Isn't that neat? To draw the grid on this box, start with 2 measuring lines with equal units and draw the horizontal and vertical lines, then continue them as converging lines to vanishing point or set up another measuring line back here. Then draw the diagonals like this and this. And then you can find these blue lines where the diagonals and the black converging lines meet, and also on the sides, these vertical blue lines. Here's a simple example of how to use a grid. And set up your design in a grid with true horizontal and vertical lines, which we call the plan view. Then set up the perspective view, converging toward a vanishing point, find its middle, and then find the lines that recede in the distance. So start with this point, go through the middle right here, and you find the beginning of this point, this line. Similarly, if you go from here through the middle, you will find the beginning of this line. Now, once you have all the grids formed, then go through each block and draw what's on both blocks. So number 8 here, for example, we want to look at 8 in the perspective view over here. And you see that it goes from the top down to the bottom. So here too, it goes from the top down to the bottom. In this situation, I established 2 measuring lines with units that help me draw this particular design. Then I drew my trapezoid, and I had measuring line 1 on the bottom here with lines converging toward the vanishing point. And I put measuring line 2 over here and drew converging lines to a vanishing point on eye level. And where these lines hit this left side, mark the position of these horizontal lines. If this vanishing point were over here more, then the tiles would be compressed. And then once you have your grid, you would be able to draw this particular design. To find people, or really anything in perspective, one way is to draw the converging lines, find sizes on the converging lines, and then you can move the figures over, keeping the size the same. Now, another approach is to draw the horizontal grid and put people in these various boxes, and then you would need a converging line on top to determine their height. To draw this folded piece of paper, Start with a box with 5 vertical divisions where the lines converge toward the same vanishing point. Then draw your curve in front and the same one in the back and connect them with lines. And when you get rid of your construction lines, you get this form. To use a grid to enlarge or reduce an image, I recommend using diagonals. So start with the 2 diagonals so you have the horizontal and vertical middles. Then you end up with 4 rectangles where you can draw more diagonals to get the horizontal and vertical middles. If there's more detail in one particular part of the grid, you can draw more lines in that particular area. And then once you have the grid, you transfer, for example, this area over to this part of the grid. Now, the other way to do that, of course, is to have horizontal and vertical lines like this. You would need 2 measuring lines in order to do that. And I find it more difficult to, for example, transfer this particular one. You have to count 2 and 3 up, as opposed to using this shape, which is pretty easily found in the grid over here. You could start with this small bureau and enlarge it, or go the other way by setting up a vertical measuring line where these horizontal lines correspond to units on that line. Then draw converging lines from each unit to a vanishing point on eye level, and where those orange lines cross this vertical line right here would be points for that mark lines on the smaller bureau. You can enlarge or reduce a rectangle by drawing a diagonal and then picking a point on the diagonal and drawing the horizontal and vertical lines. These rectangles have the same proportions. Now, for a green square here, you can enlarge it into the blue square by drawing diagonals from its corners. And then when you draw the blue square, have all the sides parallel to the sides of the green square, and the corners are on the diagonals. Now, this is much more useful when the shape is irregular like this one. And always remember to keep the sides of the 2 forms parallel. When going from a plan to a perspective view, if you can use a diagonal to identify important points in the plan view, like here, here, and over here, then when you transfer to the perspective view and use a diagonal, you can find these same important points. Now, the view could also be curving, and I started with units on this measuring line and then drew 4 units to find these sun images on the corners. This is kind of a neat way of using a grid to form an irregular terrain like this. So start with the usual grid on the ground and draw these red poles for how big or how tall you want the terrain to be in each area. Connect them with these green lines, and then get rid of your construction lines, and you end up with an image which is better than something you could have made up. My next video will be about 2-point perspective, and please remember to subscribe.